Welcome back, everybody. I hope you have a good break, and thanks, Aline, for a fantastic keynote talk. So now we're going to be hearing from our 4 speakers who will talk about the research which spans across the fields of climate and health using data science and AI. They will also share their career journeys, showcasing the diverse paths that data science can lead across different fields. Again, questions will be at the end using a Slido, and we will show the Slido QR code at the end of the talks. So our first speaker is Nicola Wiseman. They will be speaking about the use of machine learning for ocean biochemistry, broadly to understand the ocean role in carbon dioxide uptake. Nicola is a research associate in the Bristol Research Initiative for the Dynamic Global Environment in the School of Geographical Sciences at the University of Bristol. They are currently working on a project funded by the Jean Golding Institute, which aims to measure the carbon and nutrient usage of marine phytoplankton and use of statistical models to understand what drives variations in carbon uptake by these phytoplankton. Nicola, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicola Wiseman. I'm a senior research associate at the University of Bristol, and today I'll be talking about using ensemble-based machine learning for ocean biogeochemistry. And so hopefully I could start with a little bit of information that may be new to some of you, but not to others. And that is the role of the oceans in the global carbon budget. So here we have a figure that's showing from 1850 to roughly present, how much CO2 has net increased in our atmosphere in that black bar down at the bottom. And we have the different carbon sources increasing in the carbon concentrations on the left side of the figure, and then we have the different carbon sinks on the right side. And you can see that there are 2 major carbon sinks other than that atmospheric pool in the bottom, and those come from our land and ocean uptake. The ocean biogeochemistry, which I'll be talking about today, is the interaction between the ocean's biological, geological, and chemical processes, as well as physics, but we didn't want to add another prefix in there. And it's important for understanding 2 primary ocean services, which are heat storage and carbon uptake. So on the left here, we have, again, another figure that's showing that global carbon budget. And we see that the biosphere in green, that's our land plants, versus our oceans, they take up very similar amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And then there are these large pools down in the bottom that show all of the different ways that carbon is stored in our oceans and the fast cycling that is occurring there. Additionally, the ocean is really important for heat storage. And 93% of the heat from global warming is stored in our oceans, but today I'm just going to focus on the importance of the carbon uptake. So there are 2 primary methods by which carbon is taken up and stored in the oceans, and we refer to these as pumps. So we have our solubility pump, which is on the left here, where CO2 gas dissolves into the surface ocean just by natural kinetic processes, and some of that is then also released. And then we have what we refer to as the biological pump, and this is what I specialize in. We have tiny microscopic algae in the surface of the ocean called phytoplankton, and these assimilate carbon dioxide into their cells when they grow, in the same way that plants assimilate carbon dioxide as they grow. As these cells then are consumed, as they die, they sink and they export carbon to the deep ocean. There are many other processes that are going on as well, but I just wanted to sort of highlight that there's this biological component that is helping take carbon from the surface ocean that has been dissolved from the atmosphere and removing it to the deep ocean where it can stay for thousands of years. And so this process is really important for helping regulate carbon on long-term timescales. However, we have a pretty major problem when it comes to understanding our ocean's carbon storage. And that is that our oceans are massive, and we can only cover so much of them with direct measurements. So the primary way that we measure ocean data is via repeat hydrography programs, which began in the 1990s with the World Ocean Circulation Experiment, known as WOCE, that ran for 8 years. and basically established these lines that research cruises would go out and travel across and make measurements. And then they would repeat these lines every 5 years. These types of programs are now currently still maintained by a program called the Global Ocean Ship-Based Hydrographic Investigators Program, much more easily known as GOSHIP. And I have a map shown on the right here of those figures, of those cruise lines. They are intentional in sort of trying to cover the latitudinal and longitudinal, so east, west, and north, south, dynamics of each ocean basin from the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian Basin, and the Southern Ocean. And so as a result of these repeat hydrography programs, we do have a substantial amount of ocean data, as you can see in this figure on the right here, but it is relatively sparse. So this leads us to a problem where we can't take these sort of individual lines of measurements and easily create global projections of what they look like. And that is where machine learning comes in. So I'll talk more about this project in particular, but basically the idea behind ensemble-based machine learning for ocean biogeochemistry is that we're able to take these sparse observations for multiple ocean basins and create a global picture of what these measurements look like. So the idea of ensemble-specific machine learning comes from the idea of the cordyceps jury theorem, where basically by using many models with different outcomes, we can improve our predictive power. So the cordyceps jury theorem states that adding more votes increases the probability that the majority decision is correct, provided that each voter is correct more than half the time. And so this allows us to create ensemble-based models that incorporate multiple different machine learning models, such as random forests, XGBoost, which is extreme gradient boosting, K nearest neighbors, and neural networks. So I've primarily been working on the method implementation to create a Python package called able.py, which is an open source and packaged Python code that allows you to take these sparse ocean measurements and create these globally interpolated products. So it is a fully documented package that includes model uncertainty propagation across the crossfolds within each model, and uses containers for easy reproduction on a high-performance computer system or a laptop, and has been applied to a couple different applications so far, including individual species distributions, calcite production rates, nitrogen fixation rates. And so the team that is working on this includes myself, Joost de Vries, and Levi Wolf, who are both at the University of Bristol School of Geographical Sciences. So the methods that I'm going to be talking about today are primarily going to be based on these three individual machine learning models, where we have a random forest, extreme gradient boosting, and bagged KMN, where basically we're running each of these models to create different predictions, because they each have different types of predictions that they're better or worse at. And so by then taking those and leveraging their performance against each other, we are able to create a better ensemble prediction for what we're trying to predict. So here's just an example for one of those, a random forest. We have a set of hyperparameters that we define for each of these models, which include things like the number of trees, so it's the number of sort of branches that are going down, the subset of the environmental predictors that we're using for it, a subset of how much of the training data it sees. And all of these hyperparameters are fed into our model and all run iteratively and then optimize for the best performance, which is we define as minimizing the MAE, and you don't need to worry about what that means. So first I'm going to highlight a project that I was actually a part of during my undergraduate degree, so showing a bit of how far we have come in the past too many years. It's resulted in a publication in Nature Communications a few years ago, where basically we had a database of global methane measurements that contained measurements from each of the primary ocean basins. And we used just random forests and neural networks within the MATLAB's machine learning toolbox to interpolate these measurements. And here is our output from our model. So on the left, we have the neural network model. On the right, we have the random forest model. And on the far right, we have a Taylor diagram, where the idea here is down at, is it gonna work? Yes. So down at this black reference point, that is basically comparing to our data. So you have a normalized standard deviation of 1, a correlation of 1, and and an RMSE of 0. And then we are comparing here the neural net in red, the random forest in blue, and then down at the bottom we have just a simple linear regression or a multiple linear regression in this green and pink. And you can see that the machine learning methods are able to get much closer to that reference point that is considered perfect prediction. So we have a much higher correlation of above 0.8. We have much lower RMSE than we could ever get with these linear regressions. And one of the really interesting parts of this model is that we were able to use Monte Carlo methods to estimate the uncertainty of this model, where basically we ran all of these models. We ran each of them 50,000 times with different iteratives on the calculations that were going into getting our flux measurements. And so that's able to give us an uncertainty range in these predictions. And so in the end, we're estimating a global emission of methane from the ocean of about 4 teragrams per year. But then we also have a probability density function, which can be pretty informative for sort of trying to figure out the areas where, that we can improve on sort of reducing this uncertainty. As you can see, a lot of this uncertainty is in the nearshore environments compared to slope environments, which have like depths of 200 to 2,000 meters. So this highlights, if we go down to these nearshore areas, perhaps we get more data, we can reduce those uncertainty levels and reduce these bounds. Now I'm going to talk about some plankton species distributions as a more biological approach for this machine learning method. And this is highlighting work done by my colleague, Joost de Vries, and our group at the University of Bristol. So these are calcifying phytoplanktons, shown here, that are known as coccolithophores. And they are marine phytoplankton with calcium carbonate shells that form in these overlapping coccoliths. There are far too many individual species that fit within this to individually model with mechanistic models. There's over 200 of them. And most of these species cannot be studied in a lab. They're very resilient to culturing. And so the machine learning methods that we use can be used to understand, based on where we've observed these different species, we can estimate their role in the carbon cycle by figuring out how much carbon they're producing or how much carbon they're assimilating, and also figure out what species are key to contributing to those carbon storages and which ones maybe we should put some more effort into culturing to really understand their dynamics. So here is the database that is used for this project. This is the Cascade database, which is a data set of extant coccolithophore size, carbon content, and global distributions. It contains observations of 126 species over 6,000 samples, and both their organic and inorganic cell, carbon contents, where organic is that the cell itself, the biomass that they're making via photosynthesis, and inorganic carbon is those calcium carbonate shells. So from this project, which will be submitted soon, they were able to find that there are 3 species that really dominate the carbon stocks in the ocean globally for these coccolithophores. And the top contributor was Fluorosphaera profunda, shown at the top here, which has these really cool sort of flower-shaped cells, followed by the ubiquitous Emiliana huxleyi in second, and then Chalcodiscus leptoporus in third here. And you can see that each of these have individual morphologies, and they're really adapted to really specific conditions. But the one that we've studied the most is actually the second most present one, whereas these, the largest contributor is currently unable to be cultured, and the other 2 topic contributors are expected to be sensitive to ocean acidification. So we hope that this really highlights that these understudied species are really going to be important to understand going forward to understand our current ocean carbon cycle. We can get the primary output from this model is we get these spatial distributions with depth. It's also time resolving, so we have predictions for each month. So we can see each of these species have different areas where they primarily grow, where we have this Fluorosphaera profunda, which is quite deep in the waters and in the tropical regions compared to the other 2, which are typically found at the high latitudes where it's quite cold. Next is a project that I've been working on, which is the calcite production, so these calcium carbonate production by coccolithophores. And so this is, I have a quick video if it works, of the Coccolithus pelagicus forming these shells. And basically, this video is from 2007 in the lab. So we have a cell here, and you see that little disc that popped out? That is a lith. And so it's creating these liths, and then it'll just pop it out. And that's how they create these overlapping shells, which is really cool and really kind of crazy looking. So we have observations again from cruises of the rate of this shell production, this calcium carbonate production, and we're taking that and creating, again, our estimates of the global annual mean production. Now, the interesting thing that we've found on this project is previously most of this production has been assumed in the really high latitudes where it's quite cold. However, you can sort of see here, there's actually, this is depth that way, so going deeper but lined up with the same latitudes. There's a lot of production deeper down here. And so once you take into account that depth integration, the gyres are actually one of the largest contributors to this production, which has not been seen from satellite observations of this. And they end up producing, these gyre regions, these warmer water regions, end up producing almost half, if not more, of the actual annual production. And this is an area that is particularly understudied when we go talk about these cruises for this process. One of the other things that we're hoping to get out of this was further sort of trying to constrain the estimate of this global production rate so it can be used to help inform our Earth system models that are recreating and sort of modeling these processes to create predictions about future climate change. And we are within the previous estimates, which is good to see. But all of these other estimates are based on wildly different methods, and none are based on an actual global observational product except for ours. And we will be adding uncertainty measurements for both of these from model and observational. Going forward, we're just working out a few bugs still. Any questions or comments, we'll wait for later, but my email is here as well, and I'm always happy to talk about the phytoplankton. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Our next speaker is Laura Tan. Is a medical doctor, NHS clinical entrepreneur, and co-founder of Avid, a digital health startup where she combines her clinical, technical, and academic expertise to shift healthcare to be more preventative, predictive, and personalized. She's driven by a mission to redefine preventative healthcare at scale, blending human expertise with AI in a product that combines consumer-grade engagement with clinical rigor and meaningful outcomes. So we welcome Laura.
Cool. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. So my name is Laura. So as kindly explained, background as a doctor, NHS clinical entrepreneur, and then I'm also the co-founder of a digital health company called Avid. If we go to the next slide, or do I do that? Oh, sorry, I've got it. Thank you. So today I was going to talk to you a little bit more about Avid, which is our digital health company, and then spend a bit of time talking about how we're using AI in practice, specifically to drive proactive healthcare engagement. And then I was also asked to share a few tips on getting more involved into AI, data science, and I suppose health tech in general. So this is Avid. So we're a digital platform that deliver targeted care programs for better health. So really came about as my experiences as a clinician, treating many of the downstream effects of kind of poor health in action. So you're sitting in A&E, you've got heart attacks, strokes, all these things kind of coming through the door that we know clinically that we can prevent ahead of time. We know what these risk factors are, but there's a real gap at the moment in the current healthcare system on kind of getting to people earlier, giving them the support that they need. And we really saw an opportunity with both sort of better use of all these amazing technologies coming through, and also kind of better scaling human expertise as well to make sure people have the support that they need when they need it. So the core components of what we do are, number one, human health coaching. So maybe a little bit of a gear shift from kind of the AI and data piece, but actually the need for real humans in the loop. We also give people content as part of these programs, and then there's a big aspect of data tracking. And then we're using AI across all those different spaces, which I'll talk through in a little bit more detail. But essentially taking the clinical protocols that we know and have, move more, kind of eat less at its simplest form, but translating that into like a really engaging user experience that people can come through. And then we're also CQC registered as a clinical care company. So this is really sort of medical grade care, not just wellness for the sake of wellness. We're already in a couple of GP sites. We're sort of working on scaling that, and the current focus is on building out the AI piece, and then also kind of finding new partners to work with within the healthcare system. We've run a couple of programs already. So, for example, we have a cardiovascular program where the GP site basically sends us everyone who's got high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all of these metabolic health risks that we know about. And then they come through to Avid. They run through a 12-week program, they get that coaching, the content, they track all their outcomes, and then on average, we've shown people can lose 7.3% weight loss, so their BMIs go from 32 to 28, just through behavior change alone, and then there's also some other great knock-on effects on quality of life and other metabolic risk factors. In terms of me, just as a quick overview, so doctor by training, trained at Imperial College, but always had a real bug for, I think, building things, and then also really caught the programming bug. I did a integrated BSc in cardiovascular sciences where we did some sort of computer vision work on echocardiographic images, so automating the detection of these various landmarks on a moving heart image, and then ran through things such as the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, and then did an academic foundation job as a junior doctor as well, and that was a lot of research around how we can use data within healthcare to better target care, and then also how we can use things like wearables, AI, all these novel technologies that are coming through. I think those are the main things. And then ultimately kind of stepped out to co-found Avid as a company with my co-founder, again, just really to try and fix the problems that we were seeing day to day, and then we've kind of continued to grow that ever since. So 3 sort of brief things about Avid, and then I'll spend a little bit more time talking about how we're using AI in practice. Firstly, the thing that was really important to us was solving for the engagement. So as I say, we all know kind of what we should be doing to be healthier in our lives, but actually it's about getting people engaged in that further upstream. And then me and Laura just talking about things like Duolingo and all these kind of different gamification techniques. There's a lot of behavior science involved, but using that for, hopefully for good, for health, to help kind of build habits and make really sustainable change, really, which is what this is all about. And then the clinical rigor is really important to us. So everything we do is very much based on evidence, clinical best practice, existing clinical guidelines. So using health coaching, but in a very purposeful way within those frameworks in order to provide that sort of accountability check for people and keep them on track with the programs that we set out. And then thirdly is integration with existing systems. So working really close with the NHS. The way we see what we're building with Avid is very much a sort of like a new layer that sits ahead of the existing healthcare system. NHS is amazing for fixing acute problems when they come up. That's what it's designed to do, really. But in terms of coming in ahead of time before someone gets an illness, we think there needs to be that sort of new layer of care. And I think that's really coming through at the moment in a lot of policy changes as well. So Lord Darcy's report a few months back is all about more digital, more prevention, and then more care kind of outside of hospitals, so more community-based care. And I think that thread is going to continue to come through in things like the 10-year health plan that's coming out shortly. So really working as part of that bigger picture to bring forward the technology that we think the system needs, but within the frameworks that work. So in terms of how we're using AI in healthcare, I've got 3 main buckets, which I think probably also highlight all the different kind of main things that AI can be used for in healthcare in general. So one is the analytics piece, which I think has sort of already been covered by people with far more deep research expertise than me, but essentially using all the data we have available now, both in terms of what we can capture through wearables, the different kind of engagement people have, and then the outcomes that they achieve with our programs, using that to really tailor down the care that people get. I think we're so far beyond the current standard, which is, someone comes into their GP with I don't know, high health risk, high cholesterol, and get given a leaflet and say, you mean go away and come back? Like, we've got so much power now to really tailor what we're offering people, both in terms of the content, but also, you mean maybe even the format of how they like to receive education, and all sorts of things, just to really make it much more personalized and hence drive a better outcome and better engagement. Then the other big bucket at the moment in healthcare is how we can start automating our admin. So for example, at Avid specifically, we found that our coaches and our clinicians were using about half of their time on admin tasks rather than actually with our patients. So we're looking at where we can speed that up whilst maintaining the sort of clinical credibility, the quality, the safety in everything we do. So for example, for us, we use things like AI note takers. So during a consultation, when the consultation finishes, we can surface kind of an automated summary, speeds up the time of someone actually having to kind of physically type all that out. But then the human in the loop still then has the ability to then check that before it's saved to the record, which is really important from a clinical safety point of view. And I think healthcare are currently sort of wrestling with how and where they should use these tools. But there's obviously huge potential in terms of things like scheduling bookings or nudging people, or we do a lot about sort of sending people personalized content or nudging them to have achieved the goal that they said that they would do the day before. So using AI in a safe and responsible way where we can in order to reduce down the admin time, so then when you do have a human in the loop, they're spending their time on the things that matter most. Always kind of pausing on this when I'm calling out the regulatory line here. So I won't go into great detail, but essentially the software as a medical device regulation, you have to be really careful on when your AI is starting to sort of make decisions more autonomously or prioritize medical, sort of medical decision making. So there's a lot of kind of open space to work with in terms of speeding up admin that doesn't necessarily cross into clinical care, but it's something you've got to be sort of really mindful of as you innovate here. And then the other one is more on the patient-facing AI tools. So this is a super exciting space for us where we built out something with our human health coaches. They're amazing. People love them. They're really engaging. They drive the outcomes that we hope to in terms of those reduction in BMI, reduction in clinical risks. But where we can start to use all these tools that we see coming through in terms of from chatbots to voice personas to then this world of AI avatars, and people might have seen them, they're getting more and more uncanny and more sort of realistic looking. So we think there's a way to do this, but do this properly. So again, preserving the sort of human accountability, the human engagement, the empathy piece where it's needed, but whether there's things such as the AI avatar piece in terms of, so we use them in between sessions. So you still have your human sessions, but in between maybe you can check in with your AI coach and they can give you extra tips or help you recap what you'd covered before, or potentially instead of your onboarding onto an app being like a really long questionnaire, it's just a conversation with a really jazzy avatar who then again feeds back to your clinician and your clinical team. It's definitely an area of active research for us. We know there's going to be a very careful balance point between introducing these tools. But I think there's a really exciting opportunity around that. And we've learned a lot of things along the way, such as being really explicit on, say, when you've got an AI chatbot versus when you've got a human at the other end. And also there's some really interesting things at the moment coming through on conditions where there's more stigma attached. So sexual health and some mental health aspects, where sometimes people are kind of more happy to share things with an AI counterpart rather than necessarily with a human. So again, yeah, doing a lot of work there, watching that regulatory line really carefully. I've got a video if it plays. I don't know if I need to click something. Never mind. This is a sort of AI avatar that we've got introducing themselves as a member of your clinical team. I don't know if there's a...
I'm Ava, your Avid AI assistant. I'm here to help out in between sessions and provide extra support as you need. I'm up to date on all your progress through the program so far, and I work closely with your clinical team to keep personalizing your care. What can I help you with today?
So yeah, so far we found actually people are kind of quite excited to try these new tools and kind of excited to work with them. But as I say, we're sort of balancing that very carefully. We know at some point as you increase the amount of automated interaction, you're probably going to see a drop-off in actual people wanting to use this, the engagement, and then hence the outcomes that follow. So monitoring that very carefully, but obviously in terms of building accessibility to something like what we do, The human health coaching piece is super important, but it's harder to scale, especially when we're in conversation, say, with the NHS, who have sort of a rock bottom budget to be working with. So whether things like this can actually help widen accessibility to some of these support tools. And then also maybe linking back to that original data piece on, we know for some people this will really work, for others it really won't. Maybe not necessarily as simple as age ranges, but because actually I feel quite strongly that elderly people can definitely learn to use these tools, and we've had some amazing results with the Avid product on, you mean just making it really clear, really simple, but they can be your most loyal users, I think, if you spend the time there. But anyway, bit of a tangent, but ultimately, you know, for some people, they might want 50% of their care through something more automated versus something more human. Other people, maybe it's really, really important actually that it's more human. So again, we can kind of tailor these, and hopefully through doing that and using these tools for the people who are happy for them to be used with, we can, again, widen that accessibility to the type of support that we think people need. So now just finishing off with sort of 3 quick tips on sort of, I guess, building a skill set here and kind of learning on how to get involved in AI and maybe health tech, more specifically from my perspective. But I always love this concept of sort of learning and applying things. So it's obviously a space where there's loads of new skills to learn, whether that's from programming to research or anything else. But I always try and push the need to keep applying these things as you learn. I think myself in particular, I don't know, maybe came from more of sort of an academic clinical background. You just want to hide away and like learn all the things in secret, read all the books, do all the courses. But actually it's about sort of getting out and actually finding projects to work on and just almost learning as you go. And that's just such a better way to kind of consolidate all your learning. There was also a really great leader in the space called Marie Otier, who founded an AI company way back before AI was even really a thing. He was always saying how a lot of the time in these spaces that move very fast, I think women in particular have a need to sort of sit back and be like, oh, maybe I don't know enough. Like, it's obviously, I need to upskill more before I can enter the space. But actually, I think AI as a field is moving so fast that actually no one can ever learn everything that's in it. So you might as well just sort of go for it, because the problem is if you sit back and hesitate, all the people who have a bit less fear are going to go for it, and then that's how these spaces become maybe more male-dominated than they possibly need to be. My second one, I'm always a big proponent of the value in sort of overlapping spaces. So for me in particular, it was that balance on being kind of clinical, but also really enjoying the technical side of things. So, I kind of found myself at peace with the fact I'm not going to be the best doctor in the world, I'm not going to be the best programmer in the world, but actually there's a real strength in the overlap here, and I think that goes for loads of other spaces too. So whether that's kind of academia, design, analytics, I think sometimes when you're maybe like me, hopping kind of between different spaces, you can feel like you haven't followed the certain path, but actually know that there's a real strength in being able to pull from all these different spaces. So I always kind of encourage, maybe going back to the image from the beginning, the sort of wiggly paths, and you're trying different things. I'm a big fan of following what interests you most, and especially in something like this space where there's, like I say, so many things changing at any one time. It's just about kind of chasing down what excites you most and what you find most interesting, and then following your interests to do so. Yeah, that's all I have. Always keen to connect with people. Probably LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Thank you very much.
Right. The next speaker today is Penny Holborn. Penny has recently joined Ofgem, the UK independent energy regulator, as the head of data and AI literacy. This follows as a post as the head of faculty at Data Science Campus at the Office of National Statistics. Penny designed and delivered the government data science graduate program and then moved on to lead data science capability building internationally. She has a wealth of experience in developing data science careers and capabilities, and will share some valuable insights from her work in these areas, as well as talking about how Ofgem is doing with the data. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you for having me. I've got the graveyard shift, so I'm going last. So after watching all those wonderful talks, I'm a little bit, feeling a little bit like an imposter. But what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit different in that you'll see in a second my career in the kind of data science remit has gone down the route very much of sort of skills building and thinking about sort of curriculums and developing sort of opportunities for people to progress in this area in their career. So, sorry, I've lost my trail of thought already. It's not a good start, is it? So with that in mind, if we go on to our first slide. Oh, thank you. Perfect. You can tell I haven't done this in a little while. So yeah, if I'm going to sort of focus a little bit more in terms of skills and career building and the work that I've done within that space, and then I've recently joined Ofgem, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that we're doing there to improve data and AI. There we are, perfect. So my journey to start with. Okay, so I had a bit more of a traditional background in that I did a degree in maths, stats and OR at Cardiff University. Sorry, I've just gone really nervous all of a sudden. I do apologise. Just give me 1 second. Alison will know that I do this for a job all the time and I haven't done this in a little while. So I was just feeling a little bit nervous there, so I do apologise. You can see that, you can do this thing all the time and then you get up and do it after a long time. And all of a sudden you're kind of out of place. So again, hopefully empowering each other today, you can see that as a lecturer for 20 years, you get started and you do this again in a different environment and you feel all a bit nervous. So there we are. Let's kick off. So I started at Cardiff University. I did a traditional sort of route in terms of studying maths, stats and OR. I progressed on to a PhD, mainly because I wanted to keep learning and I wanted to keep doing things. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I liked to teach others and I always had a passion for teaching. And I sort of said to someone one day, oh, I think I want to do some lecturing. And they're like, we need to do a PhD to do that. And I said, okay, let's do a PhD. And they were like, that's not really the route you take to, embark on a PhD is just because you want to become an academic. But I love to learn and I love to do things, and that's kind of the route I took. And again, I didn't leave academia for 15 years following that. So I progressed through a route of sort of, building on my mathematical skills, building on those computer science skills that I sort of studied at university, and progressed into a sort of research associate role where it was all about applying the sort of technical skills in a real world environment. So most of my research up until then was all about sort of looking at sort of theory into practice. My postdoc in particular was with the NHS, looking at how could I take some of the sort of research around optimization, problem solving, and putting it into the NHS to kind of look at sort of in scheduling, waiting times, transforming services. And I grew a real sort of passion for thinking about, well, it's great to do these things within academia, and it's great to sort of build these models, but how do we actually get them into place? How do we actually transition them into solving real world problems? And what are the skills needed to actually make these work in a real world environment? And I think I still found a big disconnect and a gap at that point in time between doing that. So, there we are. I transitioned over then to the University of South Wales, and my role there was very much in developing data science programs. I was in the right place at the right time, where data science was a hot topic. I'd come from a maths computing background, so I had hopefully the skills to be able to do that. And I got really engaged with, again, sort of designing programs, in this case, MSCs in data science and external work-based learn programs, trying to give people the skills, both technically to be able to build their knowledge around this area, but also then in how to apply them within a real world scenario. And again, worked on the Welsh Data Science graduate programme, which was very much a collaboration between academia, and in that case, it was financial services sectors across South Wales that was sort of putting people into work, building the skills whilst they were working and working on real world projects to develop those sort of data skills. So again, looking to kind of bridge that gap a little bit between academia and industry. I kind of got to the point, and I'm sure it's fine to say here, that I was tired in academia. I was doing an awful lot of things, and I got to the point in my career where I was kind of like, just need a little bit of a break from this. And I'd previously met the wonderful Alison Adams, who's here today, at the data science campus of the ONS, where we'd worked on designing the data science graduate programme for government. So I was again in the right place at the right time and took a leap and decided to join the civil service and promote the sort of government data science graduate programme, which was all about teaching people the skills to become a data scientist within government, but allowing them to do that within their organisations across a wide variety of different areas. And again, I won't dwell too much more, but sort of moved around within the data science campus to not just focus on building capability in the UK, but also building internationally across our partners. So where organisations were a little bit earlier within their data science journey, what skills did they need to start to grow the understanding and the knowledge, the technology, the infrastructure to be able to use some of these techniques. And then with that, back in January, I moved over to Ofgem, very much to sort of look a little bit differently once again in a more strategic role at looking at the organisation, thinking about how can we grow general data and AI literacy in an organisation that potentially is not as data literate as you might think. You know, and people in lots of different roles who are right now quite scared of the idea of what AI is going to do for them, their job, and, you know, the organisation as a whole. So a bit more of a longer sort of background, but it kind of brings me to the point of, I was last up, so I thought we'd have some fun for a second, and I kind of wanted to take my theme of this sort of skills thing and kind of put a question to you first of all. So the Slido code for the main event is down here on the right-hand side. So you've got 2907082. If you wouldn't mind going to slido.com, I would like to hear from you, you know, and this doesn't mean, I know you're all from a variety of backgrounds, but what do you think are the most important skills to have as a data scientist? Oh, I can see some good ones coming through here. I was hoping that you were going to go in one direction and I could tell you to go in another, but you're all too clever. This is good. Okay, fab. I love these things. I feel like they, you know, it's good to see everything coming in and what people are thinking. Okay, so we can see here again, you know, there's a variety of different things. Some of the technical ones you'd expect around, you know, the statistics, the numeracy, you know, that sort of logic, coding, problem solving. But we can also see some of the wider competencies here as well around, you know, your sort of communication is great to see, that critical thinking, that curiosity. So as others have already said, you know, working with data in this environment and you building a career or following a passion uses a whole interdisciplinary set of skills. And again, you can bridge the gap between what you do, you know, in utilising some of this technology. So that was what I was trying to grow through from here. So, yeah, if we, I can see some great ones coming through this. Thank you so much. So we can see a whole variety of different things. If we pop to the next question, I was just thinking, yeah, one more, oh, it's me. Huh. I've done it now. In terms of you, though, and in terms of your work and your research, when you're working with data, what is actually the skill that you use the most? So we've seen all these things that we think we need to do to be a data scientist. I'm glad that one's come up. But practically on a day-to-day basis, what do you do? I'm loving everyone voting up the data cleaning. I feel like we've got a clear thread and a clear trend coming through here. Fab. GDPR, I'm glad someone's put something like that as well. That's a good one. Sort of policies and procedures are a point for me at the moment. Fantastic, fab. Okay, so again, we can see a lot of data wrangling, we can see some storytelling, we can see all the governance that comes in as part of, you know, using data. We can see some of the more skills we've already seen. Patience, I love that one, patience. I wish I had more patience. That takes me back to my PhD days, but that's great. Okay, fab. So why am I asking you all of this? Why is this all relevant? I think kind of wanted to sort of talk to you a little bit about my experience in trying to help people build skills or designing programs and learning to help people in the field of data science. You know, hopefully that for some of you thinking of working and developing, this might be of use for you. In government, in civil service, to be a data scientist and for a variety of different roles, we have sort of role profiles and we have competencies. And for data science, these are the competencies that you will be assessed about to be a data scientist within the civil service, okay? And what I was hoping to get out of this is on the left-hand side here, you can see you've got some of your more traditional skills, your technical skills. You know, your applied maths, your programming, your engineering, you know, knowledge around sort of ethics and privacy. So for me, that left-hand side are things that we can all learn, you know? And these are things that we can develop. And, you know, we can transition. We've heard lots of people today talking about, you know, moving between careers and roles. On the right-hand side here, these are some of the more challenging skills to build. Okay? But as academics, as people working within research, again, this idea of innovation, thinking outside the box, you know, thinking about impact. I hate to use the impact word. Hates that. This idea of actually having to deliver something, to implement something. It's not just about creating a model for model's sake. You know, this has to, you want to actually do something with this, you know, and have that sort of impact. And again, along the way for me, everything we do is about building knowledge and building that capability along the way as well. So I think I kind of wanted to touch a little bit on a lot of the work that I've been involved in doing is, you know, taking people who are great at doing these sort of things and helping them do these sort of things. And this can be anyone in some way. And just thinking about the different components that make up sort of, you know, a career in sort of data. Okay, fab. So with that in mind now, I'll come back a little bit. So, you know, under the sort of theme and umbrella for today of sort of climate and health, I mentioned that I very recently joined Ofgem as the new head of data and AI literacy. So my role there is across the whole organisation, very much looking at building skills at all levels. So where we have people in policy and legal who don't use data on a day-to-day basis, trying to help them understand how they can do their job more efficiently. So this touches a lot on what Laura's already said today in terms of looking at those tools and those opportunities to make those jobs more efficient, through to our analysts that deal with pricing and market, all the way through to our data and AI team who are looking to sort of transform the organisation into a data-led sort of organisation. So there's a bit of detail on this slide, mainly because, as I said, I only joined Ofgem last month, and I'm hoping that this will help prompt me and I'll give you a correct description of what we do as I'm still learning myself. So if you didn't know, Ofgem is the Great Britain's independent energy regulator. Okay, so in some ways we're kind of the watchdog for the energy suppliers. We keep an eye on them, we make sure they're doing, you know, the best things for customers, you know, and in particular they're, you know, supporting vulnerable customers, making sure things are fair as possible. And this sort of final remark, which kind of touches on the theme for today, is about this sort of we're making sure that we're working towards this greener environment and our goals and targets around net zero and in terms of the energy that we use. So the key here in Ofgem is all about sort of protecting customers, and we work across government and sort of other kind of initiatives to sort of stamp out bad practice, kind of highlight inconsistencies, and again, as a whole, we're trying to sort of keep the market as fair as possible, such that we're able to deliver on what we need to, while still trying to keep our energy prices down, which again is a key thing for all of us, okay? So a little bit more detail on some of those. Protecting customers then, again, we saw some wonderful talk earlier today around natural language processing. A lot of Ofgem's data is textual based. So they carry out a lot of sort of looking at the market. We look at a lot of customer complaints. We look at a lot of consultations that go out across public. We look at social media-based data to understand what's happening and patterns and trends. So again, there's a lot of work that can be done, you know, with textual data at Ofgem that we're only just touching the surface on there. Again, as you can imagine, there's tools to be used and forecasting models around kind of, you know, monitoring sort of energy prices at current, you know, and ensuring that, you know, people aren't being overcharged and just looking for changes within the market, if that sort of makes sense. So there's a lot of data that's already, you know, available, but we're trying to do more with that. You know, the other big part of Ofgem then is in this regulation space. And this is around sort of compliance and behaviours. So what you get within the energy market is some of these bigger companies that have more opportunity and more customers who can sort of set their prices. They can outcompete others within that kind of market. And then it means that we end up with sort of this kind of bad behaviour in terms of sort of not sort of kind of making this a fair market. And what we want is we want new suppliers into the market such that we're able to bring those prices down as well. So there's both the sort of ability to sort of regulate things to meet targets, but also then to make sure that, you know, the market is staying fair and consistent. And in terms of this last item here, again, there's an awful lot of targets at the moment out and an awful lot of schemes in place to try and help us move towards sort of a net zero economy. And again, you know, targets around sort of renewable energy. And so Ofgem's job is very much to sort of regulate that, to sort of run out programmes to help sort of ensure that sort of suppliers are utilising these opportunities, and how can we sort of improve the amount of sort of renewable energy that's being put back into the grid. So on that as well, a couple of other bits and bobs. You know, the security of supply is to make sure that, you know, we're looking at supply and demand as a whole, you know, and that we do have, you know, enough energy to meet fluctuating needs. So there's work generally on monitoring trends and patterns in use, as well as sort of, you know, any early signs, warnings or triggers that there's going to be an outage somewhere within the sort of grids, and what we can do with that. So there's a whole load of different types of data that we have at our disposal. And again, as I mentioned, we're only just touching the surface on what can be done with this. And the final one there is just very much in sort of making sure people are being compliant and regulating systems. So in terms of the sort of sustainability angle here, just a short case study to kind of finish off. So Ofgem, as I mentioned, sort of administers a whole load of different schemes to your energy suppliers. One of these is all about non-domestic renewable heat incentives. So basically, we pay suppliers who, you know, generate non-renewable heat into the sort of program. So if they take up sort of renewable heat, then basically they are eligible to be paid for that heat. Okay, so basically Ofgem, if I go to the next slide, I think it says it on here. Basically, we'll go to the government, ask for a big pot of money, and basically every quarter we'll sort of pay the suppliers for how much renewable heat that they have generated. And so this causes us some issues, though, in terms of further down the line, and is an opportunity for us to use our data and AI team to kind of try and improve this process. So the problem with this process is we want to go to the government and ask for the right amount of money in terms of, you know, as a grant to sort of fund this scheme. We want to make the best use of that public money. But what we don't know is how much heat or how much energy these individual companies are actually going to put back in, how much we need to pay them. And more importantly, they've got sort of a submission date for when they actually can sort of claim these reimbursements. And it can be up to 10 months after that date that they actually claim these reimbursements. So in any 1 month, we don't really know how much money we need to pay out and what's happening in terms of each individual company, how much heat they're going to generate or how much renewable funds we're going to have to reimburse, and when they're actually going to ask for this reimbursement. So again, but again, we want to be able to promote the scheme, we want to make best use of the scheme, and we want to try and do as much as we can. So there's this balancing act of money in, money out, and how can we better kind of predict that. And in terms of payments, what we need to do is forecast how much money, more accurately is going to be needed in terms of schemes like this. So it's a real manual process so far. I say there's some scripts that are generated to process some of this data, to clean some of this data up, in some ways. But what a lot of this comes down to in the end is then the experience and knowledge within the team, and that judgment and subjectivity around, oh, that's so-and-so company. We know that they're going to do more of this, and we know this is going to happen. But again, that's not sustainable. It's not useful, and it takes an awful lot of time. So even though the methodology at the moment is okay in terms of the forecast, it's extremely time consuming and isn't making best use of the data and isn't helping us have this data in other sort of scenarios as well. So basically there's work going on right now around sort of building a machine learning model here to better predict the likelihood of payments. So for every single sort of RHI, every single incentive, we've got different types of technology they generate here, or different types of gas or heat or energy. We know when the window opens for them to pay. What we want to know is the likelihood of when they're going to pay and how much they're going to pay, so we can better monitor this. So again, it's a pretty straightforward sort of model in terms of trying to use past information to predict for the future. So I think this model had something like 69 variables that we could use as part of it to try and understand how to create a better prediction. And again, I won't get into too much detail here, but basically we're just trying to forecast based off, past payments and actual payments that we've received to what a company is likely to do in the future, based on a number then of external factors, fluctuations, general seasonality, other things happening within the market. So it can become a quite complex model quite quickly as we start to feed in all of these things. Now, I can thank Nicola as well here, who's done a wonderful example of random forests earlier today. I don't know where you are. Thank you so much. So I don't need to go into too much detail, but behind the scenes here, this just cracks down to sort of, okay, we've got lots of different files with lots of different information. We need to process these and create a pipeline, to do some data cleaning for us. Where we would spend the most amount of time here, in trying to bring all of this data together. And then we've developed just a quite sort of standard random forest here, which again looks to explore lots of different branches to find lots of different sort of solutions in some ways, or decisions to this problem. And again, the more we sort of search here and the bigger our forest, the more votes that we will get on the likelihood of when this payment is going to be received, and we can make a sort of classified output here where we can either say, is this payment going to be received, so the likelihood it's going to be early, on time, 1 month delayed, 2 month delayed, etc. So there's a classification problem where we're looking to understand the likelihood of when this payment is going to be received, and then following on from that then a further model in terms of the prediction on what the payment actually is going to be. Okay, so just then to sort of finish up. Thanks, no problem. To kind of say then, I've sort of talked to you a little bit about the backgrounds of Ofgem, talked to you about the type of data that we have, touched on a very basic approach to sort of trying to look at our processes and understand where, new technology can be used. But in reality, where we are in Ofgem now is very much in trying to transform to a more data-driven type of organisation and look at the use of sort of the latest tools and technologies, and in particular AI models, to transform our business. So we've just sort of worked through creating a common data platform within the organisation which houses all of our data. Again, to basically try and improve sort of the sort of talking. Data sets don't talk, but I think they do. The linkage between our different data and our systems, and to try and make use of some of the latest tools as well in a kind of useful sort of interface. So stage one is done in building our data platform. So we now have all of our data, or working towards having our data into a common place. So now there's some real opportunity for us to do more with it. And that's kind of where we come in. So we heard Laura talk as well a little bit earlier around some self-service AI. So actually within our organisation at the moment, there's a lot of opportunity for just tools to improve the efficiencies of a lot of tasks that we do. And again, as a regulator, we do have to keep that line between, what is informed by a model versus what is informed, or what decisions are made by people in particular. So, there's a big hype at the moment around Copilot and all of these other tools and what they can do, in looking at minutes, meetings. I mentioned sort of consultations is a massive thing that we put out, an external consultation, and we'll get thousands and thousands of written responses to that consultation. You can understand as a manual process, how time consuming that may be, but there's definitely opportunities, for using some of these tools in that area, and just generally sort of searching, collating and summarising documents. So there's an opportunity here for in the self-service space. But if we think more in the expert space, which is sort of where we kind of come in a little bit, I've touched on this idea of social media and textual-based data and the wealth of information we have. So again, we have Trustpilot data that sort of looks at customers' complaints and attitudes towards suppliers and companies, that we can pick up trends and patterns around sort of people having issues or difficulties, or, reporting things, misuse with suppliers, generally sort of market surveillance in some ways to sort of track this sort of anti-competition behaviour that I mentioned. Are people trying to game the system here in terms of setting their prices? How can we sort of learn these patterns and behaviours in some ways? And again, that sort of looks again into kinds of, future price cap scenarios here, in terms of can we test a whole range of scenarios of what would happen, in different sort of cases of wholesale prices fluctuating based on a lot of external factors that we're aware of, and things that can influence the market. And finally there, in terms of sort of looking at classifying our customers into different types of sort of cohorts, and looking at sort of marketing to engage them in different ways, and more of a cluster-based approach in that. So what I'll leave you sort of with there is, there's still a lot of opportunity for sort of using data and AI at sort of Ofgem in particular, but wider. And again, we're just sort of touching the surface on what can be done there in terms of that. But yeah, that's probably it for now. Just on time.
Thank you very much, Penny. And it was really interesting to see how your career moved, from university academic background to then working in these organizations. And I think, and thank you so much to the other speakers as well. So now we're going to have a break, a 15-minute break, and we're going to come back at 6, and we're going to have a panel with Nicola, Laura, Penny, and Bea.